Imagine standing before a wall of stone so intricately carved it seems almost alive. Apostles frozen mid-gesture, angels caught in flight, and the entire story of Christ's final days told in a single sweeping frieze. This is no cathedral tucked away in Paris or Lyon. This is a small town in the south of France, a crossroads of pilgrimage routes that once drew hundreds of thousands from across Europe. And for those who knew where to look, it was considered one of the most sacred destinations in the medieval world. Today, most travelers pass right by, which means you are about to discover something extraordinary. Welcome to Walking Tour of France, a podcast dedicated to bringing you a new adventure somewhere in France with every episode. Each week we'll travel to a different destination, from ancient ruins and stunning gardens to fascinating cities, historic landmarks and hidden gems tucked away across this incredible country. If you're gearing up for your own trip, head over to northstartravelers.com, where you'll find gear recommendations to help you travel smarter, plus a full list of our other podcast shows covering destinations around the world. If you love discovering new places and planning your next adventure, follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leaving a positive review goes a long way in helping others find it. Now let's explore France. You are standing in a sun-drenched square in the town of Saint-Gilles, in the Gard department of southern France, midway between Nimes and Arles, and just a stone's throw from the edge of the Camargue. The air is warm and dry, and if you arrive in the morning, which is the best time to come before the midday heat settles in, the square is quiet, the light golden, and the stones in front of you seem to glow. And what stones they are! The facade you're looking at right now is one of the finest examples of Romanesque sculptural art in all of France. 3 great portals open before you, each framed by columns and crowned by tympana filled with carved figures. Between and above them runs a continuous frieze, a ribbon of sculpted stone telling the story of the Passion of Christ with an urgency and detail that would have stopped a medieval pilgrim in their tracks. The entire composition stretches nearly 40 meters wide, and every surface seems filled with something worth studying. Step closer. Give your eyes time to adjust to the complexity of what you're seeing, to understand why this was built, why a town this size has a church this ambitious. You need to go back more than 1,000 years. The story begins, as so many do in this part of France, with a legend. According to tradition, a hermit monk arrived here sometime in the 7th century, a man known as Giles, in French Gilles. He lived as a recluse in the wild scrublands near the mouth of the Rhone, keeping company only with a hind, a female deer that had become his devoted companion. One day, a Visigoth king was out hunting, and his arrow pierced the hind as she sheltered in Giles's arms, wounding the holy man instead. The king, overcome with guilt and struck by the miracle of the scene, offered Giles land to build a monastery. And so, the legend goes, that is how this place began. The truth is a little murkier, as truth often is when legends are involved. What we know is that a monastery dedicated to Saints Peter and Paul existed here by the 9th century, and that at some point the relics of Giles were installed inside, and everything changed. The name of the monastery changed to honor the saint, and pilgrims began to come. Slowly at first, then in enormous numbers. By the 11th century, the abbey had been drawn into the powerful orbit of Cluny, the great Burgundian monastery that was reshaping religious life across Europe. And with that affiliation came prestige, organization, and money. At its height, the pilgrimage to Saint-Gilles was considered the 4th most important in the entire Christian world, after Jerusalem, Rome, and the Shrine of James at the end of the Camino in Spain. People came from Germany, from England, from Italy, from the far corners of France. The route from Le Puy-en-Velay down through the Massif Central was one of the 4 great roads to Santiago de Compostela. And for pilgrims traveling through Provence, this town was an essential stop. Now look back at the facade, think about what it meant to arrive here after weeks of walking, to round a corner in this town and see this wall of carved stone for the first time. It wasn't simply decoration, it was instruction. It was welcome. It was the threshold between the ordinary world and the sacred one. The 3 portals before you were not built all at once. Construction on this great church began in the late 11th century and continued through the 12th, and different workshops of sculptors left their marks in different sections. Art historians have identified at least 3 distinct schools at work here. The central portal, the largest, the most elaborate, shows Christ in majesty in the tympanum above, enthroned and surrounded by the symbols of the 4 evangelists. Below, along the lintel and the trumeau, scenes from the Passion unfold with remarkable intensity. Scholars believe the sculptors here drew inspiration from classical Roman reliefs, and when you look closely, you can see it. The drapery of the figures has a fluidity, a weight that feels almost ancient. The faces have been damaged. During the French Revolution, zealous revolutionaries went through with hammers and chiseled away the faces from many of the figures. It was an act of political fury directed at religious imagery. But even damaged, even with those blank oval spaces where expressions once were, the power of the work is unmistakable. Look now at the portal on your left. The carvings here show scenes from the early life of Christ, the adoration of the Magi, the entry into Jerusalem. The portal on your right gives you the crucifixion, Mary Magdalene at the feet of Jesus, the holy women arriving at the tomb. Together, the three portals form a complete theological statement: arrival, passion, resurrection, which is not a coincidence. Everything here was deliberate. The arrangement was designed to be read, and pilgrims who stopped here were meant to leave with the entire story imprinted on their minds. Before we step inside, take a moment to notice the running frieze that connects all three portals at about eye level. This is the continuous narrative band that makes this facade so unusual in the Romanesque world. It ties the whole composition together and reinforces the sequential reading of the story. Restorations carried out between 2017 and 2018 cleaned the stone and revealed something wonderful: faint traces of the original polychrome paint that once covered these figures. In the Middle Ages, this facade was not gray and white, it was colored. The figures were vivid, the scenes were alive with pigment. Standing here, it takes a real act of imagination to reconstruct that, but it's worth trying. Now step through the central portal and enter the church. The interior you find today is not the one that medieval pilgrims knew. The original church was enormous, nearly 100 meters long, and the choir was significantly extended to the east, with an ambulatory and radiating chapels designed to accommodate the flow of pilgrims moving around the high altar and the relics below. Much of that original structure was lost over the centuries. In the 16th century, during the Wars of Religion, the town was caught up in conflict between Catholics and Protestant Huguenots, and the church suffered significant damage. A fire and the collapse of the bell tower later forced major reconstruction, and in the mid-17th century, new vaults were built over the surviving nave. The church was shortened, the grand Romanesque choir abandoned. And what you see now is a blend of that surviving medieval core and 17th century reconstruction. The massive pillars in Corinthian style hint at the original ambition of the space. What the interior lacks in medieval wholeness, the crypt below more than compensates for. Make your way toward the stairs and descend. The crypt is breathtaking. It dates to the early 11th century and measures roughly 50 meters long and 25 meters wide, making it essentially a full church in its own right, a lower church beneath the nave above. The vaults are elegant and assured, the stonework meticulous. This is where the relics of Giles were kept, where the faithful came to kneel and pray, where miracles were said to occur. In the center of the space is the tomb of the saint himself. His relics were moved during the turbulent years of the 16th century, transferred to the famous Basilica of Saint-Sernin in Toulouse for safekeeping. But the tomb remained, and it was rediscovered in 1865. Pilgrimages to this crypt were revived in 1965, and on certain feast days the space fills with candles and prayer. Stand here for a moment. The stone is cool, the light dim, the silence complete. It's easy to understand why this place moved people so deeply. When you come back up, take a detour to see something that professional stonemasons have been making a point of visiting for centuries. Behind the apse, toward the rear of the church, you will find the ruins of the original choir, the part of the structure that was abandoned when the church was shortened. Standing somewhat improbably in the middle of these ruins is a spiral staircase known locally as the Vis de Saint-Gilles. It is cantilevered. Each stone step projects from the central column without support from the step below, and it spirals with extraordinary precision. This staircase became legendary among the master builders of France. For generations, journeyman stonemasons completing their Tour de France, the traditional apprenticeship journey through the workshops of the country, would make a point of stopping here to study it, to admire the geometry and the craft. A plaster cast of the abbey facade now sits in a museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which tells you something about how widely this place was known and admired. As you make your way back through the church and toward the entrance, pause in the south side of the complex. where the cloister ruins and the remains of the monastic buildings can be glimpsed. Only fragments survive, but they give a sense of how extensive this complex once was. A self-contained world of prayer, hospitality, and commerce, serving the enormous population of pilgrims that pass through each year. Step back out into the square. The sun is higher now. The stones of the facade are warm to the touch. A plaque near the entrance reminds you that this site is part of the UNESCO World Heritage designation for the pilgrimage routes to Santiago de Compostela in France, recognized since 1998, along with 77 other components stretching across the country. Bridges, wayside crosses, hospitals, sections of ancient footpath, all preserved together as a single living monument to one of humanity's greatest shared journeys. If you have a moment, find a bench here in the square and simply look. Look at the facade you've just studied. Look at the figures that survived the revolution's hammer, the faces that didn't, the frieze that runs from portal to portal, like a sentence written in stone. Think about the people who made this, the sculptors who probably spent the better part of their lives on this one facade, who never saw it finished, who would not have known that 9 centuries later travelers would still be standing exactly where you are standing now, trying to take it all in. The town of Saint-Gilles is easy to overlook on a map of southern France. It sits in the flat agricultural land between the cities, without the dramatic profile of Carcassonne or the famous arenas of Nimes. But what it holds is something that can be rare in places that announce themselves more loudly, a genuine sense of connection to something very old and very human. People have been coming here for more than 1,000 years. They came on foot and by boat from across Europe and beyond. They came seeking healing, forgiveness, adventure, or simply the experience of standing before something larger than themselves. You've done the same thing today, and now you know where to find a quiet corner of the south of France that most visitors miss entirely. When you're ready to eat, the best option in town with real character is the Domaine de Prieuré d'Estagel, a short drive from the Abbey, a former priory estate whose own history is intertwined with that of the Abbey, now home to a bistronomic restaurant with Mediterranean cuisine, warm stone interiors, and a terrace overlooking the vineyard. For something simpler and closer, the Café de la Gare in Saint-Gilles town center is a reliable stop for a casual lunch or coffee at honest prices. Before you leave the region, there are several destinations close by that reward a visit. The walled city of Aigues-Mortes is just under 20 kilometers to the south, a perfectly preserved medieval fortress city built by King Louis IX in the 13th century. As a launching point for the Crusades, its ramparts still completely intact and walkable. The Camargue Natural Regional Park surrounds the delta of the Rhône just beyond the town, a vast wetland of pink flamingos, white horses, and black bulls, one of the most unusual landscapes in all of France. And Nimes, 30 kilometers to the north, is home to one of the best preserved Roman amphitheaters in the world, along with the remarkable Maison Carrée, a Roman temple so well preserved it was used as a direct architectural model by Thomas Jefferson when he designed the Virginia state capitol. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Before you go, a few quick things. Subscribe so you never miss a destination, leave us a positive review to help others find the show, and share this episode with someone who loves exploring France. And if you're hungry for more adventures beyond France, visit northstartravelers.com to explore our other podcast shows and browse gear recommendations for wherever your next journey takes you. Your support means the world and keeps these adventures coming. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next walk.